The stalwarts. The stalwarts.
Yeah, the Canadians, they're here.
I'm gonna recommend Malcolm All.
Yeah, so
This is child's play.
Yeah, excuse me, what did you say 30 seconds ago before
Yeah.
my Winnipeg?
Child's play.
Kinderspiel, as they say. Kinderspiel.
cancel the check even.
Yeah, all the
Did they-
schools.
did they?
Nancy Bott, everything is canceled.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the news.
Well, it was for the parents. Well, with all due respect, they canceled Toronto school boards too.
Yeah, I
so-
know, I saw it.
So it's the first time since 2011.
Yeah.
Really?
But even the school administrators still have to go in case any
Remember those
in case any kids show up.
In case.
Well, some kids show up.
So they should interview the kids coming to school.
This is a 3-year term.
Yeah, they just never had a snow day. They don't know.
Alan,
My own snow days.
you know what? I'm warning you, and you can pass it on to him, that I'm gonna call it, I'm going to ask
Well, and look how they
for
suffered.
a general meeting.
Look how they suffered.
You're not
Well, we had a couple
they're
of snowstorms.
I'll tell you that.
You know,
You
but all the,
know what?
Yeah, it was so work reported.
All of us are,
because, you know,
a snow day is a
don't
real
off
hardship.
their
I know,
Of course.
And the
Women work.
out there, the parents drive, that's the problem, you know.
Creates major headaches for a lot of schools.
You know,
Okay,
even in the city.
we'll do a little bit of learning. We thank you for coming. It's amazing that we keep the share up. Next week we meet on Monday, you know that, Alan? We meet on Monday next week, okay?
Well, they got far.
There's a flyer there.
There's a flyer, right, and even though there's a cartoon there that seems to indicate that we're talking about the golden calf, I might talk about other parts of the parsha. So, anyway, so when we study Talmud, there are often words that appear in the Talmud, and in many cases they are there to describe something tangible, something that was used 2,000 years ago. And page 464. And often the word used is one we no longer use, and we're not even sure what they're talking about. Okay, so you would have a word that if I would approach any person on the street 2,000 years ago and ask him, "Was meint das?" Now they won't understand what I mean, but they won't understand what was meint das. But if I ask them, what does this word mean? They would be very familiar with the term. They would be familiar with the word because they lived at that time and at that period.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
All the way to
Wow.
Wow.
All the way to
Boca.
Boca.
The warm Boca juice. What an adjustment. So a word that the Talmud talks about relates to Yom Kippur, the high priest, at a very significant moment when he is bringing in the Ktoret Samim, which were the spices, the incense that were burnt in the Holy of Holies. This is a very significant moment on Yom Kippur. He is walking in. He's there alone, meditating with God. And the Talmud talks about the shovel that he was using. The shovel to carry in these spices. And the Talmud notes that you should know this shovel was different than the shovel they would use on a regular day, because on this day it had, and here is a word that we are not familiar with, and commentators are not sure what it means, but they note that this shovel that was used on Yom Kippur to bring in the samim had a ni'ashtik. Ni'ashtik, this is a Talmudic word. And all the commentators have been scratching their heads since what exactly is this ni'ashtik? And at the end of the class I'll share with you what the ni'ashtik is about, okay? That's what we're going to try to do. Today we're going to focus on, if you turn to page 470, and we're going to talk about the garment, the robe of the ephod, it is called. Me'il ephod. This was a robe that was worn by the high priest, by the Kohen Gadol, starting off with Aaron, and eventually his children who took over this robe. And when it talks about the me'il, this robe, a few details are provided. And then in verse 33, we are told the following, that you should have on its hem, what are you going to have there? Rimonei, pomegranates, not real pomegranates, but rather they were cloth made, material made, designs that looked like pomegranates. In the ancient world, there was something very special about pomegranates. And there is a beauty to the pomegranate. So the garment had on its rim pomegranates. And we are told that in addition to the pomegranates, in between them, they also had, so this again, verse 33 is describing the pa'amonei zahav. It should have pa'amonei zahav, or excuse me, rimonei tchelet argaman tolat shani al shulav saviv. So it should have this pomegranate. And if you want to know what material was used to make it, it's the turquoise, the purple, the scarlet wool, and all around this hem. And then on page 472, and you have on the bottom of page 472 a little bit of a picture where you could see the pomegranates. There you could see the second item, which was the bells. Upa amonei zahav betocham saviv. And the way it worked in verse 34, we are told is the following. Pa'amon zahav, you're going to have a golden bell, verimon, and a pomegranate. Pa'amon zahav, verimon. And that should be al shulei hameil saviv, and that should be on the hem of the robe all around. Now, what's going to be achieved if he has this robe that has the pomegranates and the bells? So in verse 35 we are told, Vehaya al Aharon, they must be on Aharon, to minister, l'sharet. Venishma kolo bevoel hakodesh. It suddenly will create a sound. And by the way, Sifrei Torah, quite often, many Sifrei Torah, there is a custom by some, not by all, that they have bells as part of the silver that is added to them. Some communities, they wanted to remove the bell, it should make sounds on Shabbos, others felt it's okay. But nevertheless, this idea of the bells, right, not bells and whistles, bells and pomegranates, play a role here when the high priest is entering to serve. And as a result of doing that, velo yamut. So what we are going to be discussing today, this is our whole discussion, the symbolism of the pomegranate in Jewish tradition, and the symbolism of the bell. What's the message of pomegranate and bell? And if the Torah wants the high priest to have it on his robe, so obviously it indicates something. It tells us something about what he should be mindful of as he is serving, and what we should be mindful of what is true service of Hashem. How do you come to God? You have to have the message of the pomegranate and the message of the bell. That's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, now, Shir HaShirim. We could start thinking about Pesach a little bit, some of us, right? For some it's Oye Pesach, right? For others it is, perhaps we're not going to be seeing this weather in April, even though I know the old Canadians are going to be telling me that I still remember seeing this in May. And then people from Montreal, last year, and then people in Montreal are going to say, Montreal, we didn't take off our snow tires until May, right? That's what, no. Okay. Mamish, gewalt. So anyway, but I'm going to be optimistic. My attitude is that it's acceptable to have snow until March 21st. After that, I turn to Rabbi Shalom and I say, Ginuk is Ginuk. That's my way of dealing with it. But on Pesach, we read a love song. We are a very romantic nation. Do you know that?
Some of us.
Well, but then I know we are supposed to be very romantic with God Almighty. We have a love relationship with Him. For some of us, we appreciate more the intellectual relationship with Torah. But there are those that are indeed romantically in love with the Almighty, right? And you have to remain normal because, romance can make you, they say love is not just blind, it's deaf and dumb at times, so you have to be careful with it. But there is a love that Rabbi Shalom has for Klal Yisrael, and it is something that we should be mindful of, because if God loves every Jew, we should as well. So we read a love song, We have that struggle of translating Shir HaShirim. How do you translate Shir HaShirim, right? When it cannot, if a home has a filter on the internet and they would translate Shir HaShirim, they wouldn't give the real translation. They couldn't translate because these are descriptions that on the surface are not appropriate, so commentators suffer, and it's interesting to look at libraries in books in the library when they try to translate Shir HaShirim. What do? Art Scroll struggled with it. They had to translate the metaphor, not the actual words, which is very difficult as well, because when you do study, you have to know what a word means. So true, there's a benefit of knowing what it symbolizes, what it's referring to, but you should know the simple words, what they do mean. Struggle we do, but the rabbis focus a lot on this love. And the rabbis take the following words: Kepelach harimon rakatech. These are words in Shir HaShirim. And basically, King Solomon, or the author says, your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. That's how beautiful you are. Right? Men don't try that at home, but this is something that is described in Shir HaShirim, that the beauty, your physical beauty, is such that they are like halves, pelach, a slice of the pomegranate. Fine. The rabbis, understanding that this text has been read for centuries upon centuries as a reference to the relationship God has with the people of Israel, so they read into it the following, or perhaps they even have had a tradition that this is what it is referring to. And they work with the word rakatech, which is a temple, but also relates to the word rek. What is rek? Empty. So rekatech is empty. On the other hand, the rimon, always symbolizes something that is full. You open Rosh Hashanah, we open the pomegranate, and I don't appreciate it so much because of the seeds, and I'm just not very comfortable. I even attempted one year for Rosh Hashanah, when it's part of the tradition to bring a pomegranate, then instead we should have pomegranate juice. And I claimed that even the bottle looks like a pomegranate, so you could be yaitze, but family members decided that it's not appropriate, so they still have the exciting pomegranate. And then the kids are taught in school that you should know that if you count the seeds of the pomegranate, you can get 613, right? And we always have that discussion, is it so? Is it an average? Perhaps there was one pomegranate, perhaps not. We enter into these discussions, but one thing is full. When you open it up, you see tons, it's full of seeds, right? It's not your strawberry that has a few seeds on the outside and then you get to the fruit. It's not the apple that has seeds in the core but the rest is fruit. It's filled with seeds. It gives you the feeling of something that is full. So suddenly the rabbis in the Talmud look at this verse and they say that you should know that you are like rimon, right? Pomegranate, which is filled with good things. And then the word is rakatech, which relates to empty. You hear? Rimon is full, rakatech, rek, empty. So the rabbis read into this the following, that you should know. When it comes to the people of Israel, to the Jewish person, there's something so precious in the Jewish person that afilu reikanin shebach, even those who are quote-unquote empty, right? People that don't know anything, don't practice anything, are not aware of the value of our tradition. Nevertheless, those who you think are wrecked, though you think they're empty, meleim mitzvot, they're still doing tremendously good things, kerimon, right? Even the Jew, you think he's secular, but think about the tzedakah he's doing, think about the decency, think about his kindness. Every Jew, you think he's empty, that's not the case, we are being told here. God loves us, and when you are in love, you see the good. And even the ones you consider empty are meleim mitzvot kerimon. So the rimon suddenly becomes this symbol of they are full of mitzvot. The Jew is full of mitzvot. And it's a nice way of starting the year, by the way, because we could take that rimon and we could look at ourselves. You start the high holiday season, you think, Oy I'm so flawed. But number one, you could remind yourself, you know what? We are compared to the pomegranate. We do a lot of good things, right? It's fundamental. One of the biggest problems of education is that we always focus on the bad. We talk about tshuva, you made mistakes, right? We don't compliment others, and children are not complimented, so it becomes part of our DNA to be critical of ourselves. We're critical of ourselves, we don't appreciate the good we do. We don't appreciate the good we do, we don't do more of it, and therefore we mess up ourselves and the world. That's what happens. If on the other hand, we take this message of we do a lot of good, we're good, right? I'm a good person, I do good, let me continue doing good. If I take that message, boy, the world's a better place. Rimon is important, and this is what we are learning here. every Jew is a Rimon. Beautiful, beautiful message indeed. You know, there, in the book of Joshua, we study the book of Yehoshua, there are chapters that have names of many cities. Many, many cities. Some of them we are familiar with, some not. Some of them had a name change. And if you are careful, even by reading the text, you can identify what city it is talking about, even though the name is no longer the same name we use today. So let me share with you from chapter 19 in Joshua, where it mentions a few fortified cities. And I'll mention 3 of them that appear in this verse. Number 1, Hamat. Number 2, Rakat. And number 3, Kinneret. Names of cities. Now, a city doesn't mean, a large metropolis. It could be a little area that fortified. Someone, a group of people had a house. It could be a group of 50 people. They're in a fortified structure. They called it a city. 3 are mentioned here. Now, Kinneret, I think we already have located the region near the Kinneret. Hamat, have you been south of Tiberias? Hamet Tveria, Hamat, it's right there. The Talmud even gives us the distance between Tiberias and Hamat. It tells us it's precisely the measurement of a mil, which is about a kilometer. And the one in the world is Rakat. What is Rakat? So if you know Kinneret and you know Hamat, clearly it's referring to Tveria itself. And the Talmud tells us Rakat, which we just read in the book of Joshua, Zu Tveria, it's Tiberias. Lama nikra shmak Rakat. And the rabbis, of course, want to go ahead and break down this word. Why was the city of Tveria called earlier Rakat? What does it symbolize? What's the message? What can we take from it? So the Talmud tells us, Afilu reikanin sheba. Again, even those who are Rakat, Rakatech, Rek, empty, even those who you think are empty. Tveria was a busy city at the time. Right? It was the hub of northern Israel. Northern Israel, in Talmudic times, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, from the year 135 and on, southern Israel is destroyed. Northern Israel becomes the center. You go to Bet Sharim, which we've been there at a shul. It was exactly some 8 years ago. 8 years ago was what? 2011 it was. 2011. What time was it? 8 years?
8 years.
8 years.
Almost.
No, 8
Yeah, it was in
years.
February. It was late February. Late February, we went to Bet Sharim, and we went to Tzipori, and northern Israel's the hub. What's the hub of the north? Tveria. So Tveria had all kind of characters there, and the Talmud tells us that you should know. Tveria was called at a time Rakat she'afilu reikanin sheba, even those that are quote unquote empty, not knowledgeable, you might not consider them Torah scholars, but they are meleim mitzvot kerimon. There's something about Tveria. Why? You interact with society, you the Torah scholar, and you are taught from a young age. What defines a person is his knowledge of the text. Remember, when you see another Jew, always look at him as someone that is filled with mitzvot. Do that in Tiberias. And just a little bit more that relates to Tveria. There was a rabbi in Tveria, I think 1920s, 1930s, maybe into the early 1940s, but then I'm not sure. His name was Rabbi Moshe Clears. And he wrote a little book called Tabor Haaretz. Tabor Haaretz. The word Tabor, Tet, Bet, Vav, Resh, is the belly button, the navel, right? The center, the beginning of life. That's really the beginning of life. And he shares from rabbinic traditions that Tveria was the center of Eretz Israel. And by the way, it is true. Because perhaps don't tell Assad, right? And don't tell Hezbollah, but historically, the land of Israel extended to the north. And when you were in Tveria, and again, more than that, you have to remember that south of Beersheba, there was nothing there. It was desert. And the fact that you could go to a place like today, like Netzarim, right? And things are suddenly booming there, that is something that's supernatural. And if you want to know who predicted it, it was predicted some 2,500 years ago by the prophets. That what? That you'll have a midbar will turn, there'll be life in the desert, the verses of the prophets, right? But technically speaking, Israel was to the north because it started off in Beersheba and it ended into Lebanon and into sections of Syria, and obviously includes the Golan. So Tveria was the Tabora Aretz. So this Rabbi Clears, who was a rabbi in Tveria, he wrote a booklet about the significance of this city, a nice little booklet about how important it is. He opened the yeshiva there called Or Torah, and if you hear a lot about Rab Meir Baal Hanes and the fundraising that occurs for this institution in Tveria, he gets the credit for starting it. It's interesting to note that a few days ago I pulled out of an old book that belonged to my grandfather this little piece of paper, which says on it Tzedakah Gdolah. And what was this about? This Rabbi Clears would send to rabbis throughout the world, and included in them was my grandfather, who was most probably at the time still in Lithuania. He got this paper to put out before Purim, where he's going to raise funds. Machsis hashekel hamishloach mano, like whatever you want. Any mitzvah you want, all you got to do is send Rabbi Clears the money to support his institution Or Torah. And he even translated it into Yiddish, Brider und Schwester, and you'll forgive me if I don't read the whole thing, but he's asking for money in Tveria. And he writes here chief rabbis, Rabbi Moshe Clears, and then a Rabbi Sandberg for Or Torah, Tiberias, Palestine. So this is a piece of paper, right, nice thick paper, so that was sent out, and my grandfather probably, when he got it,
What was the date of that?
it's hard to know, because I don't know if it was obviously in the 1920s or 30s. Probably 1930s, because my grandfather became a rabbi in 1929, so I would say early 1930s. And he probably got it. I don't know if he used it or not, but it went into a book as a bookmark. And it stayed in the book for a good 90 years or something. So that's that, okay? And we're not gonna, I don't know if I'm going to put it up or not, but anyway, that's the story.
Exhibit A.
Mm-hmm. So, it's always interesting that we talk about Yerushalayim as the center of the world. And then we talk about Tveria of the center of the world, right? So it seems to be that it's in stages, because Tveria turned into the symbol of the oral tradition. You know that the Sanhedrin, their last meeting place was in the Tveria region, right? Because after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, they still had this institution. They moved to northern Israel, they settled in Tveria. There's a fascinating statement by the Rambam. Now remember, this is a rational thinker. And he tells us that you should know, we have a tradition that eventually the Sanhedrin in the Messianic era is going to be meeting to start off this rebuilding process, not in Yerushalayim. Kabbalahi, we have a tradition, Shebetveria atidin lachzor tchila. Tveria, by the way, real estate, this is something we've discussed at home, that if you want to invest in real estate in Eretz Yisrael, everything's expensive, Tveria is a good idea. And I'll tell you why. If Rambam tells us that the Sanhedrin is going to meet there, obviously it's going to be a very significant location. And if it's going to be a significant location, when indeed it happens, the real estate will shoot up and things are much cheaper there. Right? You could still buy something there for under $200,000 US dollars and be there. And just mentioning it, and it's worth as much as you pay for it. But anyway, so the Rambam tells us that things will start off in Tveria, umisham na'atik lamikdash, and then afterwards we'll make our way to the Mikdash. Meaning, things start off, and which will clarify. We have to make Tveria our center, which is a symbol of the oral tradition, what makes us special. After we understand our significance and make the Tveria message, which is ours, the oral tradition is ours, when we accept who we are, then we can make our way to Yerushalayim to be a center for humanity. This is like a little bit of a message of this idea. Miriam likes Tveria too, so this is somewhere that we are eyeing as one of the options. I like Netanya as well, but one of the options in that dream that we have to make our way one day to Eretz Yisrael. So what's the Rimon? Let's, now that we have the Rimon, in one word, what's the Rimon? The significance of every single Jew. No such thing as a wreck. There's no such thing as an empty Jew. There is always the concept of everyone is filled with mitzvot, Rimon. So I think we got half of the garment. Now we have to move on to the The bells. Good, thank you. To the bell. Now, there's a statement in the Talmud. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hates people who walk into houses without knocking. This is what we are told. And he says, for sure if you do it to a neighbor, but even your own house. Meaning, they're supposed, what's the idea behind it? Don't scare the living daylights out of people, right? Now, it's appropriate too, right? So a person had their own quiet, and suddenly, so if you have a squeaking door, right, that also is good enough. You know, there are doors that squeak, and they achieve the warning that someone is coming in, but they actually compare it to the following. Venishma kolo, again, the bells, what do the bells do? They create a sound. They create a sound when the high priest is entering into the chamber, into the heichal, into the temple itself. So, venishma kolo bevo el hakodesh, it's like a derech eretz. It's like appropriate that he's like telling God, I am here. Okay, that's one approach to be presented. Now, the Rashbam, and this is what we're going to focus on, gives us another explanation as to why there was a requirement for bells. And he says the following, that if you look in the section of Yom Kippur, the Torah tells us that when the priest enters into the Heichal, enters into the section where the holy altar, golden altar was, and where the menorah was, and where the shulchan was, we are told, V'chol adam lo yeh be'ol moed. No one should be there. Meaning, it's a time that he's supposed to be there alone. The high priest, when he enters into one of those services, he has to be, it's only him and God. No one else there. Since no one else is supposed to be there, so therefore he has to have the bells. So the bells are to notify other Kohanim that he is there, don't come in. You hear the idea. That there was this heichal, there was a structure. Kohen Gadol is walking around performing service. He was the only one with his garment with the bells. They hear the bells and they notice this is a special moment. It is only Kohen Gadol and God. Okay? So it symbolizes this closeness that God Almighty has with the high priest, and we all have with him. You know, Shalom Aleichem, you sing Shalom Aleichem Shabbos? Okay? Some do, some don't, like everything else. Do you, Litvish Mini probably.
That's right.
Chavetz
Chofetz Chaim.
Chaim, okay. Chavetz Chaim has actually insight into it, but it's in the Litvish cutting. We don't sing Eshes Chai, for example, the Litvish. Yeah, I do once a year in Parshas Chai Yisara. That's my personal minute. At least bring it to back. But Litvish and Lithuanians cut out whatever they could. Polish like saying a lot, and Litvish. Anyway, so what do you do in Shalom Aleichem? Who do you welcome? Who? Angels. What do you say to them? Shalom, bruchim, right? Bless us. And before the food, what do you tell them? Goodbye. Thank you so much for coming. Here's the door. Tzeis l'shalom. What on earth is this Tzeis l'shalom? What is it all about? So actually, the Chavetz Chaim gives insight, and he notes that throughout the week we are protected by angels as well. Those angels stayed around until the Shabbos angels came. So we say that Tzeis l'shalom to the angels of the weekday. The Vachadit ones. Yes, very nice. Now, my history a little bit. We spent 2 years in Chile. I've talked about this often, from 1993 to 1995. 2 years in Santiago de Chile. There was actually an issue of pollution there, just for the record. Like, in other words, if you think Chile pristine, yeah, there's some magnificent areas, but the city itself was in between mountains. And for a couple months, I'm just warning you, if you ever make your way during the winter months there was smog. Miriam had difficulty even with breathing at times with the amount of pollution on the main streets. Just be aware. So, nevertheless, it was a magnificent experience for me, because I spent 2 years studying with zero distractions. Zero. Meaning, obviously there was no internet at the time, right? and there was no newspaper, no radio, no TV. I knew of nothing that was happening in the world. Zero communication. And look, and survive. The main focus was study, and you would come into a small bet midrash, maybe the size of this room, and sit there for 4 hours straight, right? Then go out. But it was the most intense years of learning that I had. We had the privilege at the time to have a head of a kollel who lived in Israel, would come for 3 weeks and go back home for a couple weeks. And his name was Rabbi Shimshon Pincus. What was his name? He was a fascinating individual. One of the most fascinating people I've met in my life. Brilliant he was. He had a brisk background, meaning he studied in the brisk yeshiva, which demanded precision with halacha. But then he got involved in mysticism, and he studied Kabbalistic texts. And he was a mystic brisker, which you don't find too many of them. A very interesting one. Now, his ability, in other words, we would be studying there, and he would show up, and he would join us when he was away for, let's say, 3-4 weeks. Would come back. Within a half an hour of studying with us, he already had tremendous insight and depth into the text we were studying for a few days already. He was a well-known lecturer in Israel in the 1990s. He would attract crowds of 800 people, 900 people. It was very normal for him in Israel to attract very large crowds. And his ability to come to Chile, and he would speak to the women at times, and there would be 9 people there in the room, and you would see the same energy that he would display for a crowd of 1,000, he would display to 10 people, which was sign of who he was. So I was very inspired by him. This is a picture, just to show and tell, of Rabbi Pincus and myself. This is in early 1993. So you could give a look. You most probably could identify who's who, I'm sure. Okay. Early 1993, my first visit to the kollel. I spent some time with him. Very interesting individual. Now, so with his mysticism, he noted the following, that you should know, when we are told that when the high priest would enter into the Oel Moed, no one should be there. No one should be there. So the Jerusalem Talmud tells us that you should know, don't think that only people are not supposed to be present in the Heichal when the Kohen Gadol enters, but even angels, even Malachim. In other words, it is a time that the Kohen Gadol is only with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what the Jerusalem Talmud explains when addressing the verse where we are told in the Torah, in the book of Vayikra, that no one should be present in the Heichal. Okay? Says Reb Shimshon Pincus, now that we recognize that a direct relationship with God is that even Malachim are not present, Shabbat is all about a relationship with the Almighty. That's what it's about. And even angels are not to be present. And therefore, after we welcome them, we say, now we're starting our Shabbos meal. It's a relationship with God. And even to the angels, we say to them, Tzeichem l'shalom. Thank you so much. But now it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu and us. This was his mystical way of reading into the Tzeichem l'shalom. Okay? So now, what are the bells about? The relationship that we have with God Almighty. No one else. You hear the idea. If the bells were to notify, no one be present, and including in the no one to be present in the Heichal were angels, it's a sign of the close relationship we have with God. Now, these two together are so important because that's the core of Judaism. There are many people that focus on the relationship with God, meditating with God, thinking about God, praying to God, but then when they have to interact with another Jew that's a little bit different, right? There's some agitation, right? They're different. They don't think like me. They don't act like me. They don't dress like me. They don't daven like me. They don't have my attitude, my philosophy. So sometimes the bell approach, the bell which symbolizes no one here but me and God, right? Everyone else, even angels, make your way away because I am now to be focused and meditating with God. Sometimes it has a damaging impact on the concept of the rimon, that everyone has value, that even the rekanin quote unquote, even people that you think are empty, are meleim mitzvot kerimon. And sometimes those that talk about Jewish unity, right, and we're all one nation and we're all one, sometimes they forget that there's also a God and we're supposed to have a relationship with God, right? Sometimes you do have. It's a challenge that exists in these organizations at times that are talking about Jewish unity, right? The world, the federations, right? Federation meaning you can talk to people who are involved. Sometimes they have this problem that yes, it's a very important forum where we could have interaction and meet those that have different backgrounds. But when you talk to them sometimes about kashrut or about sensitivity to Shabbat and a relationship to God, they'll look at you as like, that's ancient stuff. Like, why are you bringing this in to our organization of a pomegranate where everyone's welcome? The Torah Jew has to be a Jew that takes with him a pa'amon and a rimon. You have to take both. You have to take the value of every single Jew and recognize, yes, there is a relationship that we have with God. No one else is there. Take that bell that tells everyone else, you go away because right now I'm meditating with God. Right? You're doing Shemona Esrei, don't look at your cell phone because it's a time with God. Yes, there is a time to use the phone and to text someone and wish them a mazel tov or to give them words of comfort, but everything has to be bringing the two together. Now, we started off our discussion with a word that I introduced in Tractate Yuma that talks about the spices of the high priest that he would bring in, the Ktoras Samim on Yom Kippur, and it mentions there that the Yom Kippur shovel of the Ktoret had a niyashtik. Remember the word? Niyashtik sounds like shtik, but it's niyashtik. It's a word that we're not sure what it means. Now, what explanation am I going to present to you? So, one of the commentators note that the niyashtik had a little bit of a bell-like function. Bell-like function. It made noise. It made noise. And due to the fact that on Yom Kippur, the high priest, by the way, was not wearing this coat. You know that the high priest had these 4 additional garments. Throughout the year he would wear them, but because they contain gold, we would not allow him to wear it on Yom Kippur. Why on Yom Kippur do we have something with gold? Sin of the gold egel. And even women up until this day, there are those that don't wear, it doesn't say anywhere that you have to take off your jewelry, but at a time when women actually wore gold within their garments, we were told, the tradition was that they would not wear such a garment on Yom Kippur. The gold is pushed aside. So therefore the garments, which include this coat, had no place on Yom Kippur. So suddenly his bells and his pomegranates were not there. But we want to have something that symbolizes both. So therefore this ashtik was needed on Yom Kippur, because as he is bringing in the Ktoret, now you know what the Ktoret is about? One of the spices of this mixture, one of the 11, was known as the galbanum. You're familiar with it? People are not into spices nowadays. If you go to Kensington Market, it's like it became a little bit of a modna makom, a little bit of an interesting place when it used to be, 60 years ago? How long ago were you still able to get a kosher sandwich in Kensington Market? None of the law, yeah? 60 years ago? When you were a kid, when you came to Toronto, was there any Jewish presence there? Not restaurant, okay, not restaurant, but there was a Jewish presence. Chef. So you would go down, okay, so that was the old Kensington, you remember, so there was still a problem, and then the decline was gradual. So now in Kensington Market, you could get all kind of weird stuff, okay, like spices and tattoos. Tattoos are popular. Some good coffee in there. Yeah, I was there a few years ago. I do remember. Yes, things that are legal now. Get there.
Sure are in Jamaica.
So among the spices, this mixture of spices that were there to create a pleasant aroma, the Ktoret, the 11th one was the galbanum, which the rabbis tell us that this chelbana, galbanum, reicha, its reach was was no good. It did not have a pleasant aroma. So why was it mixed together? So it appears that when you take galbanum and you add it to other spices and burn the incense with it, suddenly the aroma becomes pleasant. And the rabbis learned something very important from it. That if the number 10 symbolizes a minyan, a group, number 11 symbolizes the idea that we welcome the 11th, even though he's not exactly a character we are proud of, but when you join him and you recognize that he's part of your community, that is what's pleasant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does the high priest bring into the Holy of Holies? A mixture of 11 spices, telling the Almighty that we value the 11th person. We value not just the 10, the complete people, but even those that are still problematic and flawed and perhaps different. Due to the fact that they are part of the 10, it is precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the mixture of spices is very much the same message as the Rimon. We value every person. Right? So significant. And by the way, quite often, those who don't value the other, deep down, they have a lack of appreciation for themselves as well. They may not know it. Because if you really appreciate who you are for the right reason, I was created by God, right? I have a divine spirit within me. I'm Jewish as well. That gives you value. If you walk around with that feeling, you're going to suddenly value everyone, right? If on the other hand you look down at others, there's something you need, right? You're projecting because there's something within you that is problematic. You walk into the Holy of Holies, right? You walk in with an understanding that the 11 is precious. Every Jew is precious. So on Yom Kippur, he doesn't have the reminder of the Rimon. What does he have to remind him of the significance of every Jew? The Ktoret. But a Ktoret, what does it need at the same time? A reminder that it's a special time between you and Hashem. How do you achieve that? So on the garment he was wearing throughout the year was the bell. The bell that symbolizes everyone else has no place now because this is a moment of yichud between Kohen Gadol and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On Yom Kippur, that he did not have the garment with the bell, what served that purpose? The ni'ashtik, that little addition to the shovel that produced noise. That is what we are learning. So this gives us a little bit of an insight into the significant symbolism. Every single one of the garments of the high priest teach us something. And here we learn about these two messages. And hopefully we could take with us. We have later today, we're going to be in 2 hours from now, we have a difficult levaya here of someone that did value every Jew and was extremely involved in the Jewish agency, and at the same time, and this is something I might mention upstairs as well, and at the same time had an appreciation for what a shul was about. Just to tell you one thing that I'm probably not going to be able to mention upstairs was that there was Simchas Torah about a year ago. It was very hot in the shul. Sometimes in the shul we're very cold, sometimes we're very hot, sometimes we're just right. So it was a very hot thing. And it was on Simchas Torah, and people they are drained a little bit, and some people have the attitude as if it's drained a little bit too much. So I was getting hot. So what I did was I was wearing my talis. I took off my jacket, and I put it on my seat, and I was walking around for a few minutes just with my talis. For Jack, that wasn't acceptable. Like in a shul, you take off your jacket. He said, come back to me. He says, I wanted to hide your jacket. He says, I wanted to hide your jacket because for Jack in a shul, there's a way you dress. There's a way you show the significance of the makom. That was Jack, and it's hard to believe that we have to go ahead and eulogize him today. May the neshama benefit. Thank you so much for coming in this weather, and we'll see you next Monday if you're able to come. Keep Alan updated. Thank you so much.